Dear student, today we will talk about the literary term metaphor. Metaphor is a figure of speech in which one thing, action, or idea is expressed by another thing, action, or idea in order to bring out a common quality between the two. In a metaphor, instead of comparison, the similarity is stated as imaginary identity. In other words, metaphor is an implied simile. So, metaphor is a figure of speech that describes an object or action in a way that isn't literally true, but it helps explain an idea or make a comparison. The word metaphor means literally a carrying over, and by this figure of speech, a word is transferred or carried over from the objects to which it belongs to another in such a manner that a comparison is implied, though not formally and explicitly stated. Here are the basics of a metaphor. A metaphor states that one thing is another thing. Second one, it equates those two things not because they actually are the same, but for the sake of comparison or symbolism. Next one, if you take a metaphor literally, we will probably sound very strange. Are there actually any sheep, black or otherwise, in your family? Metaphors are used in poetry, literature, and anytime someone wants to add some color to their language. So, metaphor is a figure of speech that, for rhetorical effect, directly refers to one thing by mentioning another. It may provide clarity or identity, hidden similarities between two ideas. Metaphors are often compared with other types of figurative language such as antithesis, hyperbole, metonymy, and simile. One of the most commonly cited examples of a metaphor in English literature comes from the All Words Stage monologue from As You Like It. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. These lines are from your syllabus, the first poem of your syllabus, The Seven Ages of Man. The above quotation expresses a metaphor because the world is not literally a stage. By asserting that the world is a stage, Shakespeare uses points of comparison between the world and stage to convey an understanding about the mechanics of the worlds and the behavior of the people within it. According to linguist Lieberman, the use of metaphors is relatively late in the modern European languages. It is a principle in a post-Renaissance phenomena. In contrast, in the ancient Hebrew poems, one finds already vivid and poetic examples of metaphors. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, yielding its fruit in season, whose leaves does not wither. At the other extreme, some recent linguist theories view all languages in essence as metaphorical. The English metaphor derived from the 16th century old French word metaphor, which comes from the Latin metaphora, carrying over. In turn, from Greek, transfer from to carry over. The philosophy of rhetoric describes a metaphor as having two parts, the tenor and the vehicle. The tenor is the subject to which attributes are ascribed. The vehicle is the object whose attributes are borrowed. In the previous example, the world is compared to a stage, describing it with the attributes of the stage. The world is the tenor and the stage is the vehicle. Men and women is the secondary tenor and players is the secondary vehicle. Other writers employ the general terms ground and figure to denote the tenor and vehicle. In historical linguistics, a metaphor is defined as a semantic change based on a similarity in form or function between the original concept and the target concept named by a word. For example, mouse, small grey rodent with a long tail. Some recent linguist theories view all language in essence as metaphorical. In some, there are numerous results from comprehension-oriented studies suggesting that comprehending metaphorical language activates concrete source domain concept and that activating particularly concrete perceptual or motor knowledge affects subsequent reasoning and language comprehension about a metaphorical domain. So, metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase literally denoting one kind of object or ideas is used in place of another to suggest likeness or analogy between them, or an object, activity, or idea treated as a metaphor. When we use metaphor, we make a leap beyond rational comparison to an identification or fusion of two objects. Lots of common words we use every day were originally vivid images, although they exist now as dead metaphors whose original aptness has been lost. The word daisy, for example, comes from an English word meaning a day's eye. In poetry, a metaphor may perform varied functions from noting simple similarity between things to evoking a broad set of associations. So, the metaphor is the likeness is embodied in a single word, and that word is put forward as if it were the plain and literal name for the fact. Thus, a metaphor can be regarded as a compressed or implied simile with the words like, as, etc. committed. For instance, when we say man is like, so a wolf to man, we use a simile. But when we say man is a wolf, we employ a metaphor. There are other examples. The camel is the sheep of the desert. Next example. Kashmir is the Switzerland of India. Next. He is the pillar of the state. Next one. Integrity is the backbone of the character. Sometimes different metaphors referring to same object subjects are mixed together in the same sentence. This is the most serious defect in composition. One of the most conspicuous examples of a mixed metaphor is, I bridled in my struggling muse with pain that longs to launch into a noble strain. In the first line, the poet compares his muse to a horse. In the second, he compares it to a boat and again to a musical instrument. This is a faulty metaphor. If a metaphor is used, it must be sustained consistently. So, metaphors. So, the metaphor is a figure of speech or it is an implied simile.